TERCEIRA, San Francisco, Azores Islands, Bay Area. Two areas that you wouldn't expect to have such a tight connection, but for over 30 years the two regions have been connected with direct flights. Today, for the first time since 1990, the Portuguese flag carrier will take over the route. It's a great acknowledgement of the relations between the two regions, and we were there to experience the inaugural flight. Yalla, vamos, however you say it, let's go. Last week, I posted a video on the world's rarest flight and one of my favorites from TERCEIRA Island in the archipelago of the Azores to Oakland, California. We talked about why it even exists and how it's actually been wildly successful for over 20 years. This year it was announced that it would not be returning, but there is a replacement, and today we're here for the inaugural service of TAP Air Portugal from the same airport in Lajes to San Francisco, perhaps the airline's most unique route. The Lajes airport in TERCEIRA is only the second largest airport in the Azores behind Ponta Delgada, serving less than 700,000 passengers annually and a maximum of 6 airlines depending on the month. Because of this, there's only the one terminal with just a few gates. Inside the terminal, only TAP and Azores Airlines have flights, so they each had a few counters set up. I was here a little less than 3 hours before departure, and I was shocked at how few people there were. I found out later it's because mostly just the size of the airport. Locals know they don't have to get here more than 90 minutes before departure. After I got my boarding pass, I was asked to do an interview for a Portuguese news channel, completely in English, but then I made my way to the gate as the fog got thicker outside. The security in gates is downstairs, along with the arrivals, rental cars, all that. As this is a small airport, they don't have a lounge, or at least that's what I was told at check-in this time and last time I was here. If you look next to the main dining outside security, there is a room branded as the lounge. It was here last time, but the restaurant changed names. The lounge is named after the restaurant, and it was before, which makes me believe that it's just extra seating. So that is a bit different whether you start the journey in TERCEIRA or Lisbon, where there's multiple TAP lounges. Then is the security checkpoint, although I was the only person here, so it only took about 15 seconds to get through. TERCEIRA's airport appears to have 4 gates, even though the numbers go up to 6. There's a passport control in the back in the same cafe that was outside security and around the island. Make me nuts must be the thing here. Plus, all the souvenir shops are called LK777. Can someone tell me what that means? I'm assuming there's some sort of local significance. There's also doors between each gate so they can separate the gates depending on whether they're domestic or international flights. The passport control opens about 2 hours before an international departure, so, like security, I was the first one here, getting through in about 5 seconds. Then on to gate 6, the main international gate. There's a bunch of seats scattered around and then a little cafe from, you guessed it, Make Me Nuts. And it has some of the best priced airport food out there. I got a sandwich and a beer for $5. They did have a few things to celebrate the inaugural, but overall the vibes were kind of strange. There were a few people taking the flight, but I seemed to be the only one of 2 people who actually cared about the inaugural. A far cry from those giant parties United holds. But if you recall the KLM inaugural flight to San Diego a few weeks ago, they had nothing. It was a totally normal flight with no mention of the inaugural, so I'm mostly glad to have anything at all. According to the Air France brand manager I spoke with previously, European carriers don't celebrate these things very much, but American travelers are much more into the party. That's why KLM had a big event for the flight leaving San Diego, but nothing leaving Amsterdam. I'd expect that SFO will have a bigger celebration for the flight back to the Azores tonight, so we'll have to check that out when we land. We did have a ribbon cutting and photo op, but there wasn't any speeches and barely anyone noticed. TAP had a representative there, the news had one, and then there was me, and that was the only 3 people watching this thing. Kinda awkward. Then the people from Lisbon arrived by bus. The terminating passengers could exit, but the connecting passengers came upstairs and were scanned into the boarding area. Then it was time for boarding. They did have a couple inaugural goodies for each passenger. We got a TAP luggage tag and a postcard commemorating the inaugural service. Nice to have a little something. Lajes Field is kinda strange. It's got that giant runway, but the terminal was built for small regional flights. When we flew to Oakland on the 767 a few years ago, and now flying to San Francisco on the A330, the aircraft has a park on the other side of the airport, which is predominantly military. This means that we have to take a bus there, whereas the regional flights just have people walk across the ramp. Now this flight, like the Oakland flight, actually begins in Lisbon and connects through TERCEIRA. You can book the whole journey from Lisbon to San Francisco, and previously Oakland, as a direct flight, but you're still required to deplane in TERCEIRA. Interestingly enough, before the Lisbon passengers arrived to the gate, I only counted 18 passengers here. I have theories on this and why it should be okay that we'll discuss later, but I did notice that 90% of the passengers started their journey in Lisbon and booked the flight as Lisbon to San Francisco. And TAP does say there's a technical stop, but it's still sold as a direct flight. And I heard at least 30 to 40 people discussing that they had no idea where they were and why the plane landed. These people were expecting the non-stop flight like they probably had going to Portugal, and it's kind of funny how they ended up here in the middle of the ocean. Up front, TAP's got those Recaro seats in a 1-2-1 setup. This is the cabin we flew last year from Lisbon on the non-stop flight to San Francisco. These seats are kinda tight, but they're super comfortable and modern. Behind that, however, is the economy section. Perhaps my favorite thing about the A330s is they're in a 2-4-2 setup. This means that, at most, there's only one person between you and the aisle. I did attempt to get into the business class cabin for this journey, but unfortunately I was unsuccessful. But I still have content from that cabin so we can contrast it with the economy experience. I'm kinda hyped for that though, because I loved the business class experience last year, but I got a million comments from people telling me that I can't fully judge TAP until I also try the economy. So let's do that. My first impression was the cost. At check-in, most airlines offer the remaining seats for free. With TAP, they put you in an obviously horrible seat and then make you pay to change it. Most of us were stuck in the middle section. I even saw families that weren't seated together. There's also that famous TikTok of the, I think, handicapped person who said she was seated in the back, and even the crew was shocked that that would happen. But even for a middle seat in the last row, the cheapest you're getting a seat for is $60, with the forward cabin being over $100. That just sucks. Who does TAP think they are, Ryanair? The seat is the same used in economy on airlines like Qatar or British Airways' A350, but with the TAP logo and colors instead. There's the armrest on either side, with one having the recline button. In front is the TV that's a pretty good size and much less reflective than that 767 we flew to Oakland last time. Then the literature pocket and two-fold tray table below that. The pocket's nice as it's got the main pocket but also two small pockets, which is great for organizing whatever items you got with you. The legroom isn't horrible. I've seen better, but considering this is the normal legroom economy section, it's not too bad. Plus, there is charging at each seat, but not air vents. Last year, when we flew TAP's business class from Lisbon to San Francisco, we discussed the history of the carrier, so I don't want to bug y'all with all that mess again. There is one piece that has evolved, however. If you know TAP, you know that their history has been a back and forth with privatization and nationalization. The airline has bounced between private and public owners. As with many world carriers, the pandemic didn't bring great things for the airline. The European Commission approved the Portuguese government to bail out the airline, beginning with a €1.2 billion loan designated to help with downsizing and selling assets. The U.S. Department of Transportation just exacerbated the issue, however. It was found that 6 airlines, including TAP, did not provide sufficient customer service and refunds as a result of the pandemic, and TAP was levied a fine of $127 million for the required refunds. The government decided they wanted out after the Court of Audits disapproved the €1 billion of taxpayer money that would be the airline's crutch. They stated that they're just looking for the right market moment to sell. As of March, 3 companies have bid for the up to 49% stake in the airline. IAG, which runs British Airways, Aer Lingus, and Iberia, would make TAP a one-world carrier, presumably. Lufthansa Group, which runs Lufthansa, Swiss, and Austrian, would be the easiest as it could maintain the Star Alliance ties it currently has. And then Air France-KLM is the most recent bidder following President Macron's visit to Portugal and would convert the airline to SkyTeam. The motivation for the airline groups is clear, however. TAP Portugal maintains a fairly unique route network from them with very little overlap. I hardly believe that British Airways is wanting to launch Porto Alegre flights. And speaking of Porto Alegre, TAP has one of the strongest South American presences in the industry. Of all the carriers between Europe and South America, only Iberia is stronger. That makes me wonder if IAG will see the investment as redundant, or if they'll see it as a way to monopolize more of those routes. I'm bummed that it was so cloudy because the Azores are simply stunning. Just look at this from our 2022 visit. It's like if you took the fields of West Ireland, the structures of Sintra, and then draped it onto the volcanic islands of Hawaii. So much to love here, but we did see the tallest peak of Pico peeking through the clouds. The very first thing that the crew did after departure was hand out these little chocolates. And I might mention that it seems that y'all really hate the TAP cabin cruise. I've had horrible experience with the ground cruise, but the flight crews on all my TAP flights have been wonderful. But then it was time for our first meal of the flight. We were given the choice of chicken or pasta, then beverage choice, and still or sparkling water. I chose the chicken option, which brought some veggies with the chicken all swimming in this sauce or whatever it is. On the side was cheese and crackers, a grain and veggie salad, and cinnamon tapioca pudding for dessert. The cups were awfully small, so it took a single swig to down that water and Coke, but I really like having proper silverware. Apparently it's just because they're reusable instead of the plastic stuff, but it's still nice, especially with TAP branding on it. Once they collected the trays, we were offered tea or coffee to close out the meal, including the powdered creamer and pack it with sugar, stir stick, and napkin. The meal was kind of sad compared to business class, where I had so many wines and great dishes. It was one of the main reasons that TAP was placed towards the top of my rankings. In 2023, it was announced that TAP Portugal partnered with the Art of Tasting Portugal to refresh their long-haul in-flight menus for the next couple years, with food from various local chefs, with a new chef creating a menu every 2 months. So the passengers don't get tired of the same offerings, considering that if Airline's business class passengers are more often than not repeat customers. If you're looking to get some sleep on this flight, you can use the button to recline the seat. I honestly found the recline to be pretty good. It's the classic style where the seat bottom doesn't really move when you move the seat back. This does mean that you lose a good amount of room when the seat in the front reclines, but I lucked out and had no one in front of me. We also had some amenities in the seat when we got on board, including a basic economy pillow that didn't do a whole lot, and a blanket that was actually really soft and plush, not like United's economy blankets that are like wrapping yourself in a single paper towel. There wasn't any earplugs or eye mask, but these new Airbus planes are relatively quiet, and they did dim the cabin and add accent lighting overhead. Honestly, I got lucky with an empty seat next to me too. When there's 3 seats, there's enough space to lay down, but even with 2, I was able to lounge out a bit. Leaning against the window, I was able to get a couple hours of sleep. I also found the lavatories to be basic. These new aircraft have nicer lavatories, but while it does look modern, there's nothing to set it apart from the others. Like with the meal, this is another thing that's a letdown compared to business class, although I'd expect this one to be different obviously, whereas food can be strong across all cabins. Business class features the fully lie-flat seat with a pillow and blanket. Although when I flew business class last year, this was one of the things I had negative marks on. The pillow's so thin that I had to supplement it with a jacket rolled up under my head, and the comforter was also fairly thin and my feet kept sticking out the end. As we reached the US East Coast, the map showed us approaching New York, although it showed our plane being the size of Connecticut. Usually when you're on a transatlantic flight to the US, you cross up by Greenland and Canada, so it was kind of fun to look down at JFK and New York City from 40,000 feet. Definitely one of the better skylines in the world, even if we have to look at it through a contrail. I also decided it was a good time to go hunting for snacks. Comparing to the premium experience, they had baskets of mini sandwiches and crackers in the galley for us, but we could also order whatever drinks we wanted. I was able to keep myself well fed, although I did end up with a gnarly stomach flu that kicked in mid-flight on that journey, so I spent the second half of that flight trying not to be sick, and doing a lot of sleeping. But in economy today, I wasn't sick, but I was hungry. This is one area that actually is created the same. We had the same ham or cheese sandwiches, it's just that the bin wasn't quite as nice. And while I was picking my sandwiches, the attendant asked me what beverages I'd like to go with. While the cup isn't as nice as business class, it's roughly the same experience at least. For those wanting some entertainment, there's a few options. First off, there were headphones at the seat for us upon boarding. The audio quality kinda sucked, but while they aren't noise cancelling, the ergonomic shape helped to fit it in your ear better, naturally blocking out some of the sound. The seatback entertainment on TAP's flights has always impressed me. They're a relatively small European flag carrier, at least of those with long-haul flights, but the selection's huge. There's over 200 movies in here, with the genres at the bottom. But with a selection this large, I appreciate having the favorite option to find things easier with the heart icon on the top of each page. TV shows are smaller, but there's still a good amount of favorite shows, just not that many options, typically only 4 to 8 episodes. Except for Friends. I don't know the relationship of Portugal and Friends, but they got like 4 times the amount of episodes of any other show. I also did enjoy the map interface to follow the flight on. If you want to use your own entertainment, you can, but they have Wi-Fi to help you settle in. Using the card in the seat back pocket to guide you, the portal offers a few levels of Wi-Fi, with messaging being free, but otherwise you're paying for internet access up to $30 for the full flight. The cost of Wi-Fi sucks, but the entertainment is the same for all cabins, just bigger screens in business, and noise-canceling headphones, and other amenities like water and amenity kits. Just after crossing the Rocky Mountains, it was time for our last meal, which they described as more of a snack. We were offered our choice of beverage plus tea or coffee, and then all handed the same snack box. Inside was a little bag of apple pieces and a sandwich, similar to those little rolls in the back, but with some bonus tomato basil sauce. Just a teeny bit. How fancy. Now this is the last part I want to compare to business class, because even in premium cabins, these second meals are a bit lackluster most of the time. That's because they have to sit here for quite a while before being served. Business class obviously had a nicer meal, but it was still a cold meal. Something that sat in the fridge for 10 hours after being catered before it was served to us. There are a couple things unique about this route. You may recall that we were south enough to see New York, but the route also means we approach SFO on the arrival from the east instead of the north. The bummer is we don't get the flyover of San Francisco, but we do get to see Utah. I've learned in my travels that not many people outside the US know about Utah, but dang, it's such a gorgeous state. The sheer amount of national and state parks are insane. Seeing it from the air doesn't quite do it justice. Get out there sometime and see Zion, Bryce Canyon, Arches, all that stuff. Last Sunday, we looked at the reason this route exists. After all, it's got a rich history. Azores Airlines operated the route since they were founded in 1990, flying from TERCEIRA to Oakland. And TAP flew the route to San Francisco seemingly prior to that, so at least the 80s, if not earlier. I can't really tell. During summer months, Azores would record near 100% load factors on the Oakland flights, and airlines don't typically remove routes at that success level. As I mentioned previously, I can't tell which happened first. Did TAP swipe the route from Azores Airlines, or did Azores offer up the route to TAP to avoid having to lease a new aircraft for one single route every summer, considering they no longer had a fleet of their own that could reach the US West Coast? The airlines do maintain a close partnership, so personally I see the latter as more likely. TAP has also seen incredible successes on their US routes, announcing 3 new routes in December. This was one of them, being taken over from Azores Airlines. Porto to Boston will be taken from Azores Airlines network as well, and then Lisbon to Los Angeles. LA was clearly the largest unserved US market, and it just barely squeaks past the San Francisco route as the longest flight in the network, unless you count this flight as one continuing flight. TAP also still maintains by far the most flights between the US and Portugal. Last summer, they flew 686 monthly flights. United was in second place with less than half that. Azores in third with 220 monthly flights, then Delta with half of United's numbers, and as usual, in last place, American Airlines with a measly handful of flights. And of TAP's 7 cities served last summer, they all hovered around 90% load factor for the May to September period. So how do you grow from here? For a while now, TAP has been eyeing the A350. They even placed a firm order in 2007, although later converting the order to A330 and A321 models. TAP has more North American ambitions, but wants to grow east it seems. And the A350 is a great long-haul aircraft, but do they need it? The A330neo is an incredible aircraft, wildly efficient, with a great range and modern product. Personally, it's one of my favorite aircraft in the sky. I have a feeling that once the airline's bought by Lufthansa, Air France, or British Airways, essentially, the managing groups will disagree, since all of those carriers have A350s, and none of them operate the A330neo. Speculating on US destinations, however, Sacramento, Modesto, and Philly are the next highest cities without nonstop flights, although they can be grouped into the San Francisco and New York flights. Other than that, Providence, Hartford, and Texas. The Connecticut, Rhode Island, Portugal connection is major, but lacks service at the present moment, although it can be reached with the A321neos, which benefits the carrier. In Texas, Houston has the Star Alliance connection, but has growth restrictions at the moment. So maybe Dallas? I've also heard people throw out Atlanta, Seattle, and Minneapolis, but honestly, we may have to wait until we see which airline group buys them, and then I'm sure we'll see them in new hubs. Kind of like how SAS joined SkyTeam, and then launched a few new SkyTeam-specific destinations. Lastly, however, the biggest hurdle in their way is their hub. Lisbon is already overgrown. At least half the flights have to be bus gates, the airport averages some of the world's highest delay rates, and the US departures are scattered with some flights departing at times like 3:45 in the morning, just to make space. Lisbon's been looking at a replacement for the airport, but it doesn't seem like they're close. But maybe that's where Porto can help. With the new Boston service, the city is now serving 2 US cities along with flights to Newark on TAP and United. Porto's a nice city, and if they can grow up the European connections with TAP or alliance partners, they could build it into a great transit hub and take some of the load off Lisbon. If I'm being honest, the route's survival is a big question mark in my head. If you haven't seen last week's video, I'd suggest you check it out so you have some additional context. On one side, there's 100% demand for this market. Not only is there well over 100,000 Portuguese citizens in Northern California, but one of the largest pockets of Azoreans in the world is in California's Central Valley. On the other hand, as mentioned last week, I wonder if people will know about this flight. For my 2 flights on the Oakland Azores Airlines flight, the people I talked to knew exactly how to book it. They knew ahead of time what days it would fly, which website to use, and airports to put in. Now it's a new airline, but more crushing is the new airport. You can actually book this flight through Azores Airlines' website as a code share, which helps. But if these people search flights to Oakland, like they've been doing for the last 25 years, nothing will show up. It's going to depend on how well TAP markets this flight to the locals, considering that I think it actually makes more sense for TAP to operate this route than Azores Airlines, at least at this point given the fleets of the 2 carriers. But what about the TAP experience? I flew business class in last year's video and loved it. The seats were modern and comfortable, and the food was some of the best I've ever had on these transatlantic flights. Y'all did not agree with me, however. I've gotten at least 100 messages in the last year telling me essentially the same thing. I'm not allowed to create my final opinion on TAP until I fly their economy class. I thought the seats themselves were fairly comfortable and spacious, the entertainment was strong, but Wi-Fi was crazy expensive. The food unfortunately was not great. For a country with so many great dishes, they called it in on the meals. I thought most things served were flairless and flavorless. And the seat being $60 to have a window in the very back of the airplane is absurd. I mean, TAP is the cheapest direct flight from Europe to the US most days, but if you pay for a seat, that's no longer the case, and the others allow free seat selection either once check-in opens or to status holders with the Alliance, but not TAP. I still believe that TAP's business is one of the strongest in Europe, with great seats and food. I can't say the same for economy though. If you're flying economy, maybe look somewhere else. If the flight was a little over 75% full, which is historically normal for May and early June, we'll see how well performance changes in a month or 2. I chopped this up to a couple things. First off, looking at load factors and demographics of Azores Airlines' Oakland flight, there was significantly more people from California going to the Azores. This meant that the first flight only carried a few people from the Azores to the Bay Area, which averaged about 10 people per day. The load factors for the first 2 flights each season were abysmal, but then, once the Californian travelers were done with their visit and ready to fly home, the planes were 100% full almost every time. So I assume it'll be similar to that. San Francisco has seen crazy growth in the last couple of years, some carriers pulling out like Norse, but TAP is one of the carriers that's recorded more than enough load factor to be profitable, but also increase the frequency of the flight. That's why I think that TAP operating this route makes a ton of sense. And it makes it super convenient if you want to travel to or from the Azores Islands, or even just a day or 2 stopover on the way to mainland Europe. What do you think of TAP's growth strategy though? Prioritizing secondary markets in Portugal over new cities from Lisbon? Let me know below, and until next week, safe travels, and I'll see y'all next time. But wait, this was more of an afterthought, but I went to check out the party for the return flight and it was poppin', with live music and snacks. Just a bummer I had to leave before the speeches as there were some very important people there. But similar to the KLM flight, the return flight definitely has a better celebration. Okay, now goodbye.